Well, hello, everybody. How are you doing? I think I'm a tad bit early, but hey, that's not all that unusual. Trust me. How are you doing? Welcome. Now, just speak favor over all of us. Nothing missing, nothing broken in our lives. Almost stepped on that one, didn't I? So, welcome, free thinkers. I'll tell you, it's a far out day for me. When you get into deep study, many of you know the feeling, the whole world around you evaporates because what you're doing is literally, boy, there's some lights. Hold on a second, folks. Do. Not sure. Lights are flashing, and man, that's weird. Did y'all see that? I saw it. Like, where did that come from? Well, we'll just say the spirits are with us. They're obviously active. And yeah, so welcome everyone. Hello, Lois. Haven't seen you, dear. How was your Thanksgiving? Hey, Cass. Haven't seen you in a while. Man, it's so good. Claudette, good to see you. Nina the Mystic. Hello, Susie. Good to see you. And Troy, the Master Troy. Marguerite, Richard, good to see you. Dragon Soul Fox, hello. Yesterday you started your 43rd year. Well, congratulations. And, it's another day in this mind coitus reality. And however you define coitus, may it be so unto you. Isn't that the truth? Wasn't that show yesterday with Trina fabulous? I'll tell you what. Y'all missed that. I mean, that lady, she's well connected, as they would say. Yeah, good stuff. Happy birthday to all of those who are having one, and anniversaries as well. Yeah, it's part of the experience. I mean, no matter how we begin to look at this, and as we continue to get deeper in, particularly in these banned books, I love that. The ones that carry a curse, it's like, well, that's just a buffet for me. I mean, all right, if you're going to go to that extreme to say to me, well, now, if you read this, there's going to be this thing that's going to come on you. Well, bring it on. I mean, I'm going to say, let's see what you're hiding. I mean, if you got the truth on your side, what does it matter, right? Yeah. So, anyway, hey, Brandon, good to see you. And Diamond in the Stone by River Blue. It says, read it. That's a good thing to go by. All right, Skyheart, good day to see you as well. All right, we got a lot of material to cover. First of all, want to share a PDF, and David, I'll be sending it to you so we can get it up over on the Crystal Network. This is a good book to have. It's a good reference book because it virtually goes through just about every, let me get back over here, aspect of this spell of spells. And that's the only thing I can think of when you look at this, no matter how you slice it and dice it and, thrice it through, it's a spell. And the thing about it is, dealing in the world of duality of thought, duality of nature, duality of gods, not single God. I think the whole concept of a single God is a myth because quite frankly, there's a lot claiming for the title. This is a great one. We're going to be in our studies, chapter 7. And it's interesting because chapter 7 deals with Mot, Moloch, the Rephaim, and even the sun, moon, and Lucifer. That's Baal. You're going to see, as we get into this, those of you who have coming out of a Christian indoctrination, it's going to blow your freaking mind. So we will make reference to that in the future, no doubt, as we get into the presentation. And I got to tell you, much like the Liber Lilith, those of you who study eschatology, you study the history of the church, you study the scriptures, you did like I did for nearly 5 decades, bought tens of thousands of dollars of books, Matthew Henry commentary. I mean, I bought more Lexington's commentaries than you can ever imagine. And, Jeffrey Doherty does an excellent job in breaking down much of the word magic that takes place. And so I know the stories, know them really good. And when I, again, see books like the Liber Lilith, that number one, there isn't an original book of the Bible that exists. I mean, I don't know how to break that to you. There isn't. It's one of the biggest mind F's you can imagine, because once you get stuck in the mire, you can't get that shit off you, man. It's all over you. And as many of us know, it's kind of like walking on the beach, Cocoa Beach in Florida. Lovely beach. I just hated the fact that you would walk and you'd get those tar balls on your bottom of your feet. Try to get that crap off of you. That's what I'm talking about, that type of an experience. You can spend 30 minutes using all the alcohol in the world, and that crap is still leaving a stain upon you. That's what we're dealing with here. And when you get to authentication of the book, well, I love the tea. Thank you, Truth in Me. It becomes problematic because you see the so-called authors of the primary mind control doctrine today, and it's hard to determine whether those people lived or not. I always found it odd. I didn't have a problem finding that Vespasian lived. Didn't have a problem with Titus, Julius. Yeah, I mean, we know exactly what they look like. But yet these primary characters here seem to be devoid of all creative talents except for writing mystery books. And mystery books they are. So we're into a deep mystery book. And let's get right into it, because we've got a lot of material to cover. And folks, a little warning to you. Remember, I'm just telling you up front, yeah, it gets a little, interesting. All right, so let's get going. If you remember on Monday, we left off where humans are not the highest life form. And we found out that particularly Og, he doesn't like Nimrod. In fact, you're going to find no one likes Nimrod except for, I don't know, maybe Christianity, maybe Judaism. We're going to cover that. So we go on, and he says, only a half-loined Nephilim, and there is a clear difference between the Nephilim and the Rephaim. There is, and it's I'm not sure exactly what it is either. It never really tells you, but we can only imply from what Og is writing about that there is a difference. He says that cowards murder a child. For this offense and more, I regularly urinate upon the dead fecal bones, the corpse, until the meat of the offal peeled away. Nimrod's land used the smaller cells for food in secret. That's us. He traded them to the kingdom of Og for labor in the open. Nimrod also forced the males of the Nephilim males and the smaller cells males to be circumcised. The circumcision, big deal. Nimrod, the dung, smeared of mind and loin, raised smaller cells as secret food meat. Yeah. All right, let's get into it. The smaller selves. I, Og, found a large colony of smaller selves in my kingdom, a colony of smaller selves riddled with Rephaim, evil such as murder and rape as they enslaved and harmed each other. So apparently his kingdom is of such size, he didn't even know those of his own kind were intermixing with the smaller ones. And this leaves the door open to so much other. In the pantheon of the myths, the legends, the fables, whether they be religious, secular, or otherwise, we find foundations to all of those stories in books such as this one, and this one particularly. King Og was not deceptive or crafty with the smaller selves as Nimrod was. Smaller self, adult males, were struck down and eaten in the open. That's a hell of a thing, isn't it? Man, can you imagine? You're walking along, minding your own freaking business, and bam, some damn giant done picked your ass up and now split you in two. I mean, that is a bummer summer, no doubt. We chose not to hide our hunger from the smaller selves. Can you imagine what living had to been like back then if you were one of us? The Rephaim priest of Baal decreed in all lands were not to feast upon smaller self females. And smaller self females, why? They became priestess, wives, concubines of Baal. Now, we're going to find out this gets really weird. I did a whole series on Baal. That series is approaching nearly, I think, 750,000 views. This is not the Baal the Phoenicians brought out of the Canaanite, the Hittite, all of those ites over there. I mean, this is not the same one. So I can only imagine what wives and concubines, because I know what it means in the Abrahamic definition. And I have a sense, I don't think that there's that much of a variation. Not to be known by any member. Now, Baal said, don't mess with those smaller ones. Set the females aside for me, and you leave the rest of them. And I guess it was endorsed, condoned. If you're hungry, help yourself, right? Yikes. All right, the Rephaim, and I love this, I've got it. The Rephaim, they teach humans. Now, this has direct correlation to Genesis 6. Are these the watchers? Are these the fallen angels? Don't know. They said that we taught the smaller selves not to kill or rape. Okay. Kind of see, don't do as I do, but do as I say. We taught them and to procreative value of smaller self females. Procreation, big deal, big deal, big deal, big. Well, actually, it's a big deal for our species. There are many countries that are seeing, the birth rate plummet to the point that there's not enough new births to replace the ones who have been here, visited, and said, see y'all. Now, Nimrod and Og both taught the smaller selves Baal's truths during all times of peace and war. So if this predates the Hebraic, Abraham God, then who's bringing what to the table? We taught the smaller self skills of service to the Rephaim. Okay. I mean, imagine the skill sets that one would need in serving a king. the king and his kingdom would need representative of all skills. And you could basically say that all skills were, in fact, pretty much, all the trades. So here we have a picture of Moloch. Now, Moloch is representative, and when you look at the whole pantheon of the Canaanite mythos of what their gods were, Moloch's right there with Baal. I mean, they did the same thing, the sacrificing of children. It's an old practice. And the reason why I'm showing this, because this is the smaller selves practicing this, not the giants. So let's talk about sacrificing of children. The Rephaim priest and Baal decreed the sacrifice of the tiny, worthless, smaller self children to undo the unspoken mistake. And you're going to learn what the unspoken mistake is all about. This is important because this seems to be a decree of this Baal, who is the god of the giants. And I guess if you want to take it and extend it out, this is really either the original, which eventually something that was taken over by the Elohim, Yahweh. But Yahweh, I am convinced, is part of this family bloodline. And I believe it is a bloodline. Even within the Canaanite religion, beliefs, it was established that Yahweh and Baal were brothers. I showed that earlier. So just put this into the mix. We're building a hell of a stew here, aren't we? Oh, no pun intended. Steiger, that was in poor taste. Yeah. I'm just going to keep on reading. Nimrod's Nephilim kingdom and that of the Rephaim, land of Og, sacrificed all smaller self children with effectual fervent ritual, being of one mind and spirit, bleeding for Baal to undo the unspoken mistake. Yeah. No kidding, man. This unspoken mistake we're going to get into, but what it's really bringing out to this is, again, it's a complete paradigm shift as to all of us, as to how we see ourselves, even in today's culture. But yet, whether it is metaphorically, allegorically, communion is what? You fill in the blank. So this angers many Jews who realize the hexagram was used in ancient mystery religions, particularly where Moloch was concerned. He was considered the demon of unwilling sacrifice, and is also interesting the name of the stone owl in the elite worship at the Bohemian Grove. So this is really bizarre. Now, you look at the bull. Folks, this is the god that runs or rules today the financial systems. This demon, this demigod, never left. And if any of you have been up on the corner of Broad and Lexington, you know what I mean. People go by and touch the bull. It's supposed to bring you favor, wealth. And the reason why I'm bringing these points to bear here, folks, this has been established for thousands of years. As reprehensible as it is. So who is Baal? Well, you're going to find out that actually Baal is the Trinity. Yeah, bizarre, isn't it? but Baal is the Trinity. We read, Baal of the earth, that's the first, has land with greenery and healthy vegetation, fruits and nuts. Baal of the earth also saw to Og's success in the 100,000 giant war. We're really going to get into this one, folks. In fact, I'll tell you, we probably won't get into it until Friday, maybe even Monday. Folks, this is the most graphic, realistic description of the flood that you will ever read. Hollywood has never even come close to duplicating what the description of how the flood began. Baal provided mountains to climb when the waters covered the earth. Scream to Baal of the earth, all Rephaim, scream and beg for the undoing of the unspoken mistake. You could say, in a sense, the story of Adam's fall is the unspoken mistake for man. Think about that. Bring forth the smaller self, child offerings, and come before Baal. Scream and bleed in the fertility awarded us for our worship, the fertility that will prolong the Rephaim. Tremble before the all-powerful Baal, before his established land of fertility that cannot be moved. Before his altar, and bleed on it. We await the extension as we scream, Come, Lord Baal, in unison. Where have you seen this before? I'll give you the clue in Jeopardy. Revelation? Why, you got the daily double. So this is Baal. Baal has many different descriptions and you can see why there's many different statues and pictographs of him. So Baal speaks. This is very interesting. Baal, the smaller self-prophetess, prophesied the following. I am Baal, your God, who delivered you from Nimrod in the 100,000 giant war. Where have you heard that before? I am Baal of the earth, who will provide the extension to the Rephaim. Because of this, you will bleed yourself before no other gods. I do not honor the circumcision. It is good for the Rephaim not to know the smaller selves. You will not cut your members for any of the other insect-sized gods that demand it. May the destruction of my enemies buried in their punishment until the end of time. Worship me, and I, Baal, will extend your power and give you ... Consider this. A time is coming when you will all worship Baal of Haman. He is coming in a storm. Every eye will see him, even those who practice circumcision. Let the enemies tremble and let the earth shake. The great Baal of the Rephaim that stands above the insect-sized gods. Filth is the land of his heritage. All will ascribe penance and worship. Blood sacrifice is fertility. I will empower. Do not tire Baal's power as you see the lush country, as your crops. Speaking through the smoke from the darkened sacrificial fire, the worship must frenzy and gash with knives and lances. Baal, your God, delivers and promised extension of the Rephaim lineage. Proclaim the power of Baal on the fertile mountain. Continue, I will extend you. This is a covenant. Now, if you're looking in the pantheon of gods in the Eastern tradition, Yahweh, Baal, I mean, we can just go through them all. You can't say that what is written in one particular book is more legit or more I don't know, powerful just because you have a name in place of that God saying it. I will bless you coming in, I will bless you coming out. I mean, listen, I could take this very same thing and through just a manipulation of 2 or 3 words, I could put this into the Bible. This is El. So this is Yahweh. This is El. This is, some say this is Anus. I mean, so these people took worship seriously. Now, I wrote this. I said, one must stop and consider exactly what is being said here. First, there appears to be 2 different interpretations and beliefs of a god named Baal with the apostrophe in between the 2 A's, or just simply Baal. Each share character traits in common, and either description mirrors the Hebrew, the Christian, the Islamic, and the Hindu gods as well in one form or another. This Baal is clearly the god of the Rephaim and not the Hebraic god of the humans. Baal sees this god as an insect, interesting comparison, inasmuch all humans see their god as the same size as them. Think about that. This is most troubling. The most troubling aspect of the prophecy of Baal he made a promise and swore an oath sealed in blood of human babies and children, along with other disgusting things done to humans in these rituals. They don't get into, I think, and I'm glad they don't. And this is bloody, brutal. But nevertheless, if you trace back in religion where blood is a primary foundation, and that is Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hindu, they all require blood sacrifice of some kind. Usually it's ours. So this is no different, really. So how is this any different than the Hebrew God demanding animal or human sacrifice and blood sacrificing to seal covenants? Isn't that how Abram got the blood covenant? Wasn't it an animal that was split in 2 and both of them walked in the blood? And Abraham cut, the whole thing with Isaac, the whole thing with circumcision. This is how all of this is tied into this. So this would seem either Baal lied to the Rephaim or the clock is still running. I mean, if for myself, I come out of the Christian religion, the indoctrination was intense. And you naturally assume the position that anything that goes against what you've been taught, and listen, the person teaching most time is more ignorant than the person that's the student. But nevertheless, this forms perceptions, and that is what you begin to establish your life based upon. I contend, I don't think if Baal existed, and we know the giants did, I think that cat is still here. As I told you, I think Moloch is, in fact, the transformative god of the modern world that the god worships. You're going to see something here really closely. So this is interesting because this actually came out of the Old Testament. This kind of tells you the land of the giants. And you can see why, particularly the giants felt that this was an invasion. They were here first. But because of supposedly some covenant, there's another god giving away their land. One that they don't worship, one they don't like, and one that they are in a war with even beyond the grave. Listen, it's a known fact that Yahweh had a wife, folks. You just think that the Trinity, in the way it's formed, would be contaminated with a woman. That's how it is. So let's talk about Nimrod, because you see, Nimrod most likely is what the modern religions are still worshiping after. Yeah. So in the time before the unspoken mistake, when Og's land heralded Nimrod's accomplishments, Nimrod was called the Great Hunter and a killer of the large giants and things. You can only imagine what large gargantuan things are to giants. To us, they would be freaking blowing our mind, right? While on the field of battle, Nimrod did sustain a loin injury when he engaged the one-eyed Rephaim named Argi in warfare. This very same one-eyed Argi who fought alongside Og in the 100,000 giant war. When Nimrod wounded Argi's neck with the driver and chaser, these are huge freaking, one's like a spear and one's like a freaking axe. They love these driver and chaser things, by the way. They're huge. Augie's unconscious body fell to the ground with his outstretched hand still grasping his sword. And so you can imagine the sword must have reached 10, 15, maybe 20 feet. The sword blade sliced upward at Nimrod's loins, cutting open his foreskin. The skin of Nimrod's wounded member hung as a testimony to all. Nimrod knew his own vulnerability. He then returned to his army and reclined in his tent. He took the flint of a mountaintop and finished his own circumcision and bound his loins in a sackcloth. He then had the braids of his head shaved. He shaved his beard and eyebrows and anointed his head with oil. His cup was filled with wine, and he reclined to think. After a short while, he arose and sacrificed many smaller selves and beseeched Mot. And we're going to find out who Mot is. And oh, folks, are you in for revelation on Mot? To delay the battle. He then took the mountain flint and circumcised 1,000 Nephilim of his army. Those that refused were cut down by the axe. Yeah, it was a draft, you know. Either by the axe, the chaser and driver, and their bodies were tied to trees, and a Baal sickness afflicted Augie's army for 5 days, time enough for Nimrod to heal. Yeah, I mean, you begin to look at this stuff, man, and tells you, number one, that they had customs, the character, the traits. And these are intelligent beings. I mean, what is smart? I don't know. I mean, that's subject. All right. So now Nimrod mandates circumcision. Now we don't know if this is something that Nimrod brought up. You know, it's legend that it was the Elohim named Yahweh who brought this thing in. And that's the thing that you're going to find out with Baal that's against Yahweh. You know, he mocks him. It's like, you know, listen, you said you created them. What? You found something that you made a mistake on? Anyway, on the 6th day, Nimrod and his army then went to war with no lower garments or loin coverage. Hey, they were kind of into the going commando thing. You know what I'm saying? The armies of Argi did not know Nephilim was Nimrod in battle. One-eyed Argi's army gazed upon the compromised members of Nimrod's army. They were befuddled and dumbfounded by them. Imagine this. I mean, I think they literally had to stand there and literally froze. Did you see what those crazy MFs have done to themselves? What the hell is going on here? Well, that's the perfect time. Nimrod's giants then attacked them with clubs, drivers and chasers, fists, boulders, and trees, and slew them all but Augie and his bodyguards. After Nimrod's circumcision, the 7-year famine began, for Baal of earth was displeased. The famine from Baal of the earth consumed the land. The very earth itself was dry and stiff with wounds at this time. I mean, folks, you can, I know many of you that are listening to this, your mind is painting a fantastic picture. Some you're not quite sure of, but, the descriptions are just, this is The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. This is, you can throw them all in there. Crazy stuff going on. So Og is now going to tell his history, the history of the Rephaim. Lesta, queen of the Rephaim, and I, Og, were bred from the spoils of a Rephaim procreation harvest. This is a fertility festival. Born of worship to Baal of the moon, born in the temple and reared in the high places. I, Og, trained in both the priesthood of Baal and with the chaser and driver war arts. Lesta became a sorceress before Baal of the moon and a transcriber of words. Interesting. So they had a language. They had a written language. I don't think sometimes that gets into our thinking that these creatures, the species, had a language. They obviously had a voice box. They had the comprehension of speech. Apparently, they had diverse languages. And apparently, they had something that apparently was much older that required, in this case, a transcriber of words. Now, that can also be entailed. You're going to, when a prophecy is spoken, when someone is, being used as a medium, channeling for the gods to speak. Yeah. Now, before the 100,000 giant war, before the confused circumcision, and before the unspoken mistake, there was a time of lush success. Baal of the earth caused the waters to flow and for crops to flourish in all the great land at the time. The great land was alive, the colors, the sounds, and connections. And this is very important, folks. This connection is almost like the Vulcan mind meld. You can do astral travel. You can become an animal. You can actually become the animal that you're connecting to. You can connect to the earth. It's very interesting. And the connections of beings in the land were bright and different. The feed animals were sleek and fat. The herds of the lizard, the elephant, and the rhinoceros prospered. Wine flowed, fruit, nuts, and honey were plentiful. Peace ruled all the lands. There were no smaller selves in that time. The seasons of Baal of the earth multiplied the nations of the Rephaim. No people, folks. No Adam, no Eve, no Neanderthal, no Homo erectus. Well, maybe there may have been Homo erectus, who knows? But apparently, from the Rephaim point of view, hey, we ain't here. That's a mystery. So the birth of August. In our 300th year, the panic of childbirth seized my wife, Lesta, after she became heavy with offspring. She then bore me, August, the inheritor, after traveling through great pain and labor. The birthing crippled Lesta, bedridden for 10 years. I took connecting to August. His breath became my breath. He became a good prince in the eyes of the kingdom and all who surrounded him. I taught him the ways, Baal of the moon, the managing of my kingdom, the ways of the giant lizards, the ways of the elephants and the rhinoceroses, the ways of the floating beast. Now, I can only imagine, I don't know what those were, pterodactyls, who knows? But yeah. I then taught August the way of connection. Through the battle and through acquaintance, he was connected. From Baal of the moon, the sun, earth, and the host of the skies, to the animals, the creeping things, and the floating wild beast, August was connected. This connecting is powerful. It's something that I've never seen written about man. And it's interesting that here with this particular race, that they're using something telepathically, something at such a level, it manipulates matter. It transforms their souls, their spirits, to other beings. Their bodies can begin to transmute matter, and they can become different animals. This is wild stuff, folks. So yes, they seem to be in some ways very prone to mistakes, but so is humanity. You could say humanity is a simpleton. We have no track record to be bragging about. Something to think about. With favor, I favored him, and with love, I loved him. This is very important. It shows that they have empathy, that they have the ability to hurt, to love, to be afraid, to have sorrow. Wow. Seems like almost a sentient being, doesn't it? I entered into covenant with August because I loved him as my own soul. Folks, I'm not saying that this character is any prince. I can't judge them. I didn't know their culture. I didn't know their species. To me, much of what I'm seeing and personally is reprehensible, but I'm not qualified to make a judgment here, because this alone tells me that they are aware. They're spiritually aware. Maybe more than most humans. I gave him the skin of Leviathan. Now, Roger over at Mud Fossil University has shown us that the ones that we see fossilized, 1,300 miles. I can only imagine what that must have been like. I gave him hammered armor. I trained him with the driver and the chaser. August, the son of Og, proved himself great in war before both Baal and the Rephaim. Because of August's strong ways of connection, the Gontawika soon chose him. This is a creature that we'll learn more about him in, but it was also in the other book, the book of Lamech. August then became the herdsman of beasts and lizards between groves of sycamore figs. When the 100,000 war began, August, the inheritor, was a leader over many powerful giants in war. Those were the floating beasts, the drivers and chasers. You can only imagine. All right, so you've heard of the unspoken mistake. Let's learn what the unspoken mistake is, because this affected this species, as you will see. In the 4th year of the drought and frost by night, the false Rephaim and Nephilim, priest of Baal of the earth, moon, sun, and all the host of heaven led the giants to the unspoken mistake. Queen Leshta was henceforth known through both kingdoms as the last of the giant females. In this season, the smaller cells were found in both lands. From that time forth, only the smaller cell females were trained to serve in the temples as priestess and sorceresses. The proper use of smaller cells were as slaves, temple servants, and food for the giants. Smaller self men, indeed, became food for the giants, and their male offspring were indeed burnt in sacrifices to Baal of the earth in the hills above the kingdom of Og. Nimrod's kingdom chose to circumcise the males of the smaller selves. He allowed the smaller selves to marry. He didn't sacrifice their offspring as the Rephaim did. Circumcised Nimrod became the champion of the smaller selves and their great circumcised hunter. Many years after the unspoken mistake, Baal of the moon's sorceresses prophesied that Leshta would be with a Rephaim moonchild. Leshta was past the years of childbearing and was still afflicted by the wounds of August, the inheritor's birth. Leshta, upon hearing the prophecy, said, "After I am worn and waxed old, and my Og is old too, yet we will yet have delight? How am I, the last of the Rephaim females, bearing a child of the moon?" Leshta mocked and ridiculed the prophecy. In Leshta's anger, she removed herself from the place of worship to her forest and resided there until her death. Now, I want to bring out something here. Those of you who studied Genesis and Abraham and Sarah, this is exactly what Sarah did when the three angels told Abraham that Sarah was going to have a child. And Sarah was 99, I think. Do you see the correlation? Now, only if you've ever studied the scriptures would you have known that. But yeah. So what came first? We go on. The moon child was Baal of the moon's most fertile gift to prolong the Rephaim and the Nephilim species. The most fertile gift required heavy sacrifice. For 7 months, under the moon, the drums were beating, which shook the firmament of the land. We slaughtered and sacrificed innumerable smaller self-infants and males in the high places. The undrunk blood rolled through the blockstone channels to the lower earth. The burnt offerings of the smaller self-infants and males smothered and darkened the skies. Listen, this sounds reprehensible, and it is. But folks, how is this different when the Temple of Solomon went for weeks where they sacrificed animal after animal? It said that the blood ran down the temple steps, that the smell of burnt flesh could be smelt tens of miles away, and that the burnt offerings were of such darkness that the soot of it was falling everywhere. It's no different, folks. Now, I want you to begin to think the moon child and begin to correlate how someone could take this. I don't know if you want to call it plagiarism, you want to borrow it, I don't know, as Babylon the mother. It's deep, folks. But there is good evidence that this is where and what we're dealing with. Oh, yeah. The 7 months. For 7 months, we seared the flesh of the smaller cells for the moon child in sacrifice. We ate the flesh and drank the blood in the sight of Baal of the moon. We never doubted. When the 7th moon had passed, Leshta had again grown heavy with moonchild. And this is, if many of you are thinking about almost the virgin birth, yeah. She then went into labor, toiling with the moonchild for many days. The sorceresses flayed themselves mightily before Baal of the moon. Many died. On the 7th day, the moonchild, the last female of the Rephaim, was born. Leshta did not heal and soon turned stiff. I, Og, laid myself out before Baal of the moon's altar for 2 days, pleading for Leshta's life. On the 3rd day, Leshta died. With Queen Letesta's death, Baal of the moon's promise had both depleted and blessed the Rephaim. In mourning, Leshta, I celebrated the birth of the moon child. Let's do a little observation here because this really gets interesting. This story has many connections to the story of Abraham, and one cannot but think of which came first. It would seem the time of the Rephaim was way before the time of Abraham, and the conditions and manner of the smaller self ones, us humans, is beyond comprehension. The horror of our species endured. One can easily understand why man invented his own gods to counter what was being experienced. Man needed a savior. How could you not, as a community, as a group, and I'm sure that people were obviously, the humans were going between these kingdoms and everywhere else. But now you know these stories are where they're coming from. And so man had to invent a savior. Also, one cannot help but see a direct connection to Mystery Babylon here. And as we progress into the text, the reader must keep in mind the stories of man's confusion from the Tower of Babel to Babylon. Modern man still struggles for the meaning. The story of the Rephaim may hold some keys to unlock memory. When we look at these 7-headed snakes, dragons, this is not of the Elohim. This is of a different kingdom, a different species, a different God. And folks, understand Yahweh is an Elohim. They are different. And Babylon of Nimrod. Nimrod is playing more and more a role, I am becoming and seeing, in modern day society, in modern day man's religion, than any of us can imagine. We have the stories, the books. They're there. There is something here that many have missed in the many clues. Most will never read the Epic of Gilgamesh and will have no idea what Dagon is and who and what the fish god is. But Babylon, here, look at this, folks. We can get into this. The cone of life. I could begin to get into a lot of what we know much of this is. And this knowledge I do not believe that any person named John the Revelator ever wrote any of this. Now, he may have been taking some mushrooms or something and had known about these ancient books and grafted the story into his. But the fact is, the story goes back to the time of the giants. It just depends on whose side and whose position and interpretation you're taking. I have a sense that this will be coming back and is already here. Let's continue. The second false prophecy. At this time, Mot. Now, we're not going to have time today, but tomorrow we'll get into who and what Mot is. So at this time, Mot spoke through Nimrod's sorceresses, telling them that the suitor for the moon child was in Nimrod's kingdom. This was another false prophecy that ended the species of the giants. As I, Og, mourned the loss of Lesta, his wife, Nimrod and his military leaders traveled and visited the kingdom of Og to view the moon child. Nimrod then spoke to the giants of Og's kingdom and spoke the prophecy of Mot. Nimrod requested that the moon child be raised in Mot's temple in his Nephilim kingdom. When Nimrod spoke, the darkness of Baal's spirit and the truth was in the air. Nimrod said the purpose of the moon child would be to breed in Mot's temple for the procreation harvest. I, Og, disagreed and had my military remove him. I think this is a good place for us to break out right here, because what happens next is the defining moment again for a species. But you can see for yourself, it's an amazing story, number one. And I just simply say, when you see some of the things that are very hard to read, to digest, our species is no different. We're no saints here. And as the story develops, you're going to see exactly how the Savior came about. You're going to see exactly how hell came about. You're going to see exactly how the myth of the flood. Anyway, these are just going, and you're going to find out a lot more. Yeah, Darth, I think it is too. It is a, what happened? Someone not liking this? I don't doubt it, but hey, it's all right. We put the warning out there. But again, it presents a challenge in our whole basis. Listen, if you can find something before the beginning of even the story of man, and then you find that this thing that we're so obsessed with, what so many of the world is, the apocalypse, the end of time, and realize that maybe it's not speaking about humans at all. Maybe there is something that was lifted out that fit the narrative, but the controlling part, the power, may surprise us yet. It's fascinating. It's a tragedy. I mean, you could write this as a Shakespearean play. You can make a movie out of it. I mean, it's one of these things that when you get into it, it's dramatic, it's repulsive, it's mind-bending, it's fascinating, it's wonderment, all together. Because again, I know why the church banned this. If this had gotten out at the same time that Christianity was being molded into the fable that it has become today, it would have never existed. Never. It blows the whole thing wide open. And that's the weakness. Once you blow open something that's considered perfect and sacred and begin to see the cracks in it, and then more importantly, when you see the backdrop for which it's actually applied to, the backdrop is actually the larger. Thank you, Susie Q. Boom, knowledge, yes. They can't hide that away. Somehow I'm hearing Natalie Cole in my mind, but yeah, so we're going to learn. This ended up, I think, going to be about 6, 7, but when we get at the end of it, we're going to have a good discussion. Those who would like to maybe come on and you have to really follow it through, because I don't want anyone who's missed this. But at the end of it, because virtually you're reading almost a book, I'm not adding everything in there. You're getting the gist of the story and the important details. And, I think it's got implications metaphysically. I think spiritually, this has huge implications. I think it begins to define that the separation of spirits in the afterlife. I'm beginning to understand why. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, folks. This has been fun. I mean, this has just been freaking far out. I really enjoy this. I mean, it's taking, hours and hours, tens, and I'll probably end up putting 40 or 50 hours into this by the time it's done, but it is so well worth it. Because I got this thought, when you look at Yahweh and you study that whole theology, and then you begin to look at us today and you say, all right, what if there is this war? What if this war has never been settled? What if something's waiting for a sacrifice of such magnitude? Us. I mean, that's what the apocalypse is. Is it not a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice? 1/3 of us will be sacrificed. For what? And what are we bringing in? I'll leave you to ponder that. Until we meet again, my friends, thank you. All right. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.